In a world where power is often abused, where the innocent suffer under the weight of unchecked authority, and where justice sometimes feels like nothing more than an illusion, stories like these aren't just fiction. They're a mirror reflecting the harsh realities so many people face every day. This is A One Storyteller, the channel that dares to bring you the truth, wrapped in compelling narratives that will make you think, feel, and question the world around you. What happens when those in power believe they are untouchable? When a man who has spent his entire life walking with dignity is treated like an animal? When a son who has risen to become the most powerful leader in the world is forced to witness the brutal reality of racism and corruption? Some stories are meant to entertain, but this one is meant to wake you up. Because this isn't just about one man, it's about all of us. So sit back, watch closely, and let this story unfold. But be warned, once you step into this world, you won't be able to look away. This is A One Storyteller, where justice is never silent. The warm afternoon sun bathed the quiet suburban neighborhood in a golden hue as James Carter, a 72-year-old retired schoolteacher, walked down the sidewalk with a slight limp. His cane tapped against the pavement, a steady rhythm that echoed the years of wisdom he had accumulated. James had lived in this community for over 25 years, and every day he took the same path. Past the park, past the old corner store, and past the towering oak tree where he used to sit and read to his late wife, Margaret. Today was no different, or at least it wasn't supposed to be. As he rounded a corner, he spotted a police SUV parked on the curb. Standing beside it was Officer Luke Simmons, a man known for his aggressive behavior and history of excessive force. Clad in his navy blue uniform, a smug expression rested on his face as his gloved hands toyed with the leash of his K-9 Rex, a massive German shepherd with keen eyes and a powerful build. James paid them no mind. He wasn't doing anything wrong. Just an old man enjoying his afternoon stroll. But in a world where being black was often enough of a crime, he should have known better. "Hey, you there!" Simmons' sharp voice cut through the air. James hesitated, then turned slowly. "Yes, officer?" Simmons narrowed his eyes. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" James furrowed his brows. "I live here." Simmons took a step forward. His posture reeked of unchecked authority. "You got ID?" James sighed, his patience already wearing thin. "I don't have my wallet on me, but like I said, I live here." Simmons smirked, his grip tightening on the leash. "Funny, I don't remember seeing your face around here before." James clenched his jaw. He had spent his life teaching young minds the values of respect, kindness, and fairness. But standing before him was a man who had likely never learned any of those things. "I don't need your permission to walk in my own neighborhood," James said, his voice firm but calm. Simmons' smirk twisted into a sneer. "Oh, we got a smart one." He stepped closer, eyes glinting with something dangerous. James took a cautious step back, and then, in one horrifying instant, Simmons muttered the words that sealed James's fate. "Rex, get him." James barely had time to react before Rex's powerful jaws sank into his forearm. A searing pain shot through his body as the beast snarled, its teeth tearing through his flesh like a savage predator. "Call him off!" James screamed, staggering backward. But Officer Luke Simmons stood there, arms crossed, a twisted smirk playing on his lips. "Stop resisting," he sneered. James collapsed to his knees, his cane clattering to the ground as he struggled against the sheer force of the attack. The K-9's weight bore down on him, knocking him onto his back. Rex's growls filled the air, his teeth sinking deeper into James's arm, shaking violently like a wolf tearing through its prey. Blood spilled onto the pavement. James's breath came in ragged gasps. His body was old, frail. He couldn't fight back. Every muscle screamed in agony as the dog continued its relentless assault. He kicked weakly, trying to push the K-9 off, but Rex was trained to dominate. Through the haze of pain, James looked up. Simmons just stood there, watching. James's mind raced. This isn't about the law. This isn't about safety. This is about power. He tried to cry out again, but his voice came out in a weak rasp. He could feel himself fading, his body going limp under the unbearable pain. The world around him blurred, and just when he thought this was how it would end, a loud screech filled the air. Tires, fast. A black SUV whipped around the corner, speeding toward them. Simmons turned, his smirk faltering. Then came the voices, deep, commanding, familiar. "Stand down now." The SUV came to a screeching halt, the doors flung open, and within seconds, Secret Service agents swarmed the scene, weapons drawn. A tall, powerful-looking man stepped out of the vehicle. His expression was thunderous, his presence alone demanding authority. The moment his eyes landed on the bloodied figure of James, everything else vanished. His father, lying on the ground, being mauled by a police dog. President Malcolm Carter's entire body went rigid. His heart pounded, his vision turned red. "What the hell is going on here?" His voice was a sharp blade cutting through the chaos. Simmons froze. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His face drained of color as realization set in. He had just sicked a K-9 on the father of the most powerful man in the country. The K-9 was still latched onto James's arm, its snarling filling the tense silence. "Get that dog off him," Malcolm roared. One of the Secret Service agents immediately moved in, yanking Rex away from James with expert precision. Another agent dropped to his knees, assessing James's injuries. Blood soaked through the old man's tattered shirt, his breath weak, his body trembling from shock. Malcolm knelt beside him, gripping his father's good hand. "Dad," he whispered, his voice tight with barely contained rage. James' eyelids fluttered open. Through the pain he saw his son's face, the same boy he had raised, now a man, now the President of the United States. A faint smile cracked his bloodied lips. "Knew? You'd come." Malcolm swallowed hard, forcing back the burning fury rising in his chest. He turned his head slowly toward Simmons. The officer stood rigid, his face a mask of fear. He knew he was finished. "Secure him," Malcolm ordered, his voice cold. In an instant, Simmons was tackled to the ground. "Wait! You don't understand," Simmons thrashed under the grip of the agents. I didn't know who he was." Malcolm stood up, his towering frame exuding an authority that made Simmons shrink. "You didn't know who he was?" Malcolm's voice was pure fire. "You mean you thought he was just another helpless black man you could abuse?" Simmons stammered, his arrogance evaporating. "You thought you could do this and walk away?" Malcolm's voice was dangerous now. Simmons was sweating. I was following protocol." Malcolm took a slow step forward, his gaze never leaving the man who had just nearly killed his father. "You call unleashing a trained attack dog on a defenseless elderly man protocol?" Silence. Malcolm's jaw clenched. "Take him away." Simmons's eyes widened as he was dragged toward the black SUV. No, you can't do this. I was just..." The car door slammed shut. Simmons was gone. Malcolm exhaled, running a shaky hand over his face before turning back to his father. James was being lifted onto a stretcher, an oxygen mask placed over his face. Malcolm followed closely, his expression unreadable. The news exploded within minutes. Headlines blared across every major media outlet. "Police officer attacks president's father with K-9, national outrage. Corrupt cop gets taken down after viciously injuring elderly black man. President Carter vows swift justice." Social media erupted. The footage recorded by bystanders who had witnessed the brutal attack spread like wildfire. Millions watched in horror as the video showed James Carter, a frail elderly man, being viciously mauled by a police K-9, while Officer Luke Simmons stood by, smiling. The backlash was immediate. Protests ignited across the country. Crowds gathered outside police departments chanting, "Justice for James! End police brutality! No more unchecked power!" Within hours, the Justice Department announced an emergency investigation into excessive force by law enforcement. The FBI took over the case. Simmons was officially charged with assault, excessive force, and attempted manslaughter. Meanwhile, inside a high-security hospital in Washington, D.C., James Carter lay in bed, bandaged and weak but very much alive. The sterile beep of the heart monitor filled the quiet room. An IV dripped fluids into his bruised arm. His once powerful hands, the same hands that had guided his son through life, now lay motionless against the crisp white sheets. By his bedside, President Malcolm Carter sat, his large frame hunched forward, elbows on his knees. The President of the United States, arguably the most powerful man in the world, looked helpless as he stared at his father's injuries. A thick silence settled between them. Then James' voice, weak but filled with humor, broke through. "You scared the hell out of me, boy," he muttered, cracking a tired smile. Malcolm exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You scared me, Dad." His voice was rough, edged with emotion. "I thought I lost you." James tried to chuckle, but it turned into a weak cough. "Not my fault you raised a president. Can't even take a walk in peace anymore." Malcolm swallowed hard, his hands clenching into fists. "This shouldn't have happened," he murmured, his gaze darkened. "Not to you, not to anyone." James studied his son's face, seeing the storm brewing behind his eyes, the anger, the pain, the determination. "You always wanted to change the world, Malcolm," James said softly. "Now's your chance." Malcolm looked up, his jaw tightening. "You think I won't?" James gave him a knowing look. "I think you already know what you have to do." The next day, White House press conference. Cameras flashed. Reporters packed the briefing room. The tension in the air was thick. Then, the double doors swung open. President Malcolm Carter walked onto the podium, his expression grim. The entire world was watching. He adjusted the microphone, then looked directly into the cameras. "Yesterday, my father, an innocent elderly man, was brutally attacked by a police officer abusing his power. He was targeted for nothing more than existing while black." A heavy silence fell over the room. "This stops now," murmurs rippled through the crowd. "For far too long, this country has allowed law enforcement officers like Luke Simmons to act without consequences. That ends today. As of this moment, I am signing an executive order to launch a full-scale investigation into police brutality across this nation. Any officer found guilty of excessive force will face the full weight of the law. No more excuses, no more immunity, no more covering for corrupt cops." The room erupted with voices. "Mr. President, what will happen to Officer Simmons?" a reporter shouted. Malcolm's expression hardened. "Luke Simmons will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and I assure you he will never wear a badge again." A wave of approval surged through the country. The people had waited for a leader who wouldn't back down, and they finally had one. Back at the hospital, later that night, Malcolm returned to his father's hospital room. He sat beside James, taking his frail hand into his own. "It's done, Dad," he murmured. James opened his tired eyes. "Good," he whispered. "Proud of you, son." Malcolm squeezed his father's hand gently. "This isn't over," Malcolm said softly. "Not until real change happens." James gave a weak but satisfied nod. "Then keep fighting." And Malcolm would. Because now this wasn't just about his father. It was about every person who had ever suffered at the hands of unchecked power. The fight for justice had just begun. This is more than just a story. It's a wake-up call. Every day people suffer under the weight of injustice. People like James Carter, a man who spent his life doing the right thing, only to be treated like nothing by those who swore to protect him. People like the countless victims whose names never make it to the headlines, whose cries for help are ignored, whose pain is dismissed. But not this time. This time, the world was watching. And that's the power of truth. That's the power of standing up, refusing to be silent, and demanding change. Because when one voice speaks out, it gives 1,000 others the courage to rise. This is why stories like these must be told. Because injustice thrives in silence. But when we speak, when we act, when we refuse to back down, justice has no choice but to listen. The fight is not over. The fight is never over. But as long as there are people willing to stand, as long as there are people who refuse to be silenced, we can change the world. This has been another powerful story from A1 Storyteller, where truth meets justice and the fight for what's right never stops. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you feel something, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below. Tell us what you think, and most importantly, subscribe to A1 Storyteller so you never miss a story that challenges, inspires, and reveals the truth. Because one thing is certain, what's hidden in the dark always comes to light. Stay strong, stay aware, stay fighting. Until next time, keep your eyes open. A one storyteller where justice speaks.